show a little bit ill, so we had to sort of cancel at last minute. And we'll get the guests that we had planned on for next week on another time. But we're live and direct now from London. It's the 20th of April during our odd times that we live in. And so if you're listening to this on 20th at 9 p.m. UK time or whatever your equivalent is, we are live. It'd be lovely to hear from you. You can join in with us. Drop me a line on +44 7506 319 745 on WhatsApp. If I like your question a lot, I'll even get you online and you can join in the show. And we've got a great show this evening. I'm really happy I got well enough to sort of be able to come and talk to Chris Duke, who is ex-broadcaster, I think still a broadcaster. You've got your own podcast now, and I think you still do some radio, but we'll talk about that and catch up with what you're doing. An author, a dad, a husband, a general good guy, a man who spends far too much money on microphones, we have discovered. But it will add to the quality of the evening. So it's great to, and also a mental health advocate. I forgot that bit. That's why he's here. It's not his microphone. It's the mental health advocacy that has brought him on to us. But it's really good to have you with us, Chris. Welcome to the Wellbeing Show.
Do you know what? It's really good to be chatting to you as well. It's really nice. It's really nice to be doing something with my evenings for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. How many kids have you got now?
I have three beautiful girls. My eldest is 11 and my youngest is 4.
Right.
So I am well outnumbered in this household, which is why I've got 2 male dogs.
Quite rightly too. But welcome on the show. It's really good to have you. I'm guessing from your accent that you're not in Hackney like me. No, not from Hackney, anyway.
No, definitely not. I'm away up the other side of the country, almost at the top. I'm in a little town called Forfar, which is just shy of Aberdeen.
Yes, in Aberdeenshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, nice part of the country. I've been up there quite a lot, actually. I used to live in Edinburgh. I spent 10 years in Edinburgh, actually, sort of in the early days of my career, and did a lot of travelling around Scotland. If people haven't been, you're really missing out on the treat. Scotland's a stunner. It really is. And now it's a good time to go. The midges are not there at the moment. They come out a little bit later in the year, don't they? So don't midges turn up. It's horrible.
Yeah, that's when we all go on holiday, is when the midges come up.
Absolutely, on midge season, get out. But Scotland is a gorgeous place. And how's it been the last few years for you in terms of the pandemic and all that sort of stuff?
Well, what way to start? I mean, for everybody, the past few years has been rough for everybody. And it took me a long time to realize that. So,
right.
Interesting
answer. Nobody's actually said that, but I get it. You explain what you mean. But I think I get it.
I took it personally. I thought, why is this happening to me? Because I ended up having to close my business, and and we ended up we lost a lot of money, and and these were important things at the time before the pandemic, and all of a sudden it all went away, and I thought, why is the world doing this to me?
Yes, quite.
But everybody had their own journey and their own struggles at that time, and it took me a long time to accept that and accept moving on to whatever was going to be next.
Yeah, it was quite a shocker, but obviously you have done. Your background, and I don't know if this is the background during the beginning of the pandemic, but your background was as a DJ and as a broadcaster, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was about 5 or 6. About 5 or 6 years ago. I was the breakfast radio presenter for a station called Wave 102 in Dundee. It was one of my dream jobs. So when I was a little boy, I was the little boy who had 2 tape players and I'd press record on one and I would do all the talking. I'd press play on this one, I'd push them together, and I'd make radio shows for my parents.
Right.
So getting to be a breakfast radio presenter was just a dream come true.
And I seem to remember when we were chatting about it on the phone, you not only got your dream job, but you were actually very good at it as well. I think you turned the radio station around quite a bit, didn't you? Or certainly that segment of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds really arrogant to say that, but in Dundee there was two main radio stations. Yeah. There was the big radio station that was owned by the massive network. That I'm sure every city's got. Well, London's got hundreds of them, but and then there was the local radio station, which is what we were. So it started off where the listenership was about 15,000 listeners a week, and the other radio station, the big radio station, was getting over 100,000 listeners per week. But as my show progressed, my listenership doubled, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and the other radio stations' listenership started to dwindle, and it got them to kind of sit up and go, oh, hold on a minute, this local radio station's is playing the game now. And but I loved it. I loved every single moment of it. And to give you an idea of where we were near the end, I had Ollie Murs on my show at one point. Yeah. And when Ollie Murs goes on tour, he invites the local radio DJ to come and host his show. It's normally the big station, the big network station. And the other breakfast presenter was expecting to get this gig. I had Ollie Murs on the show, and we had such great chemistry together. He asked me live on the show if I would do it.
Brilliant.
That's the kind of difference that it made. I loved it. I mean, honestly, it was probably one of the best jobs that I had, and we'll go into more about what I did after that. But that, looking back, it is rose tinted glasses. But I really, really loved it.
Great. And you went into that via being a club DJ, is that right?
Yeah. So I was I had my own business, which was I was a disco DJ. So I was the guy who would do your birthday party.
Really?
Yeah. But I always seen that as a way to get into radio. It was good practice for me.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to shift my DJ voice. So if I was doing a birthday party, I would start speaking like this, and I'd be the radio, I'd be the DJ, and I'd talk like this, like what you got, smashy and nicey,
Yeah.
And when I got into an actual radio station, they had to try and get that out of me, because
I'm sure that would have been really irritating.
Yeah. Could you imagine waking up and good morning, it's Christian from the
turn it off, go to the next station. Absolutely. That's incredible. And so what was the attraction to you growing up and sort of wanting to be, because all of that is quite high profile. That is what I'm getting at. You're having to perform in front of people, either in the studio or live. There's a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, I kind of thrive on that, to be honest with you. I am a performer. I've always have been since I've been a wee boy. If I was standing in front of my parents and doing a little show for them when I was 5 years old, to hosting that Ollie Murs concert in front of 10,000 people, I always thrived on it. I loved the energy. I was never nervous to perform. I was always excited to do it.
Yeah.
When I was in, for example, the hoodie that I'm wearing, this is from a musical that I was in, The Producers. Yeah. Where I was the lead.
Based on the film?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, it's one of the best films around. It's a hilarious story.
Oh, it's Mel Brooks, anything Mel Brooks puts his hands in, it's genius. So I was leading this one, and when I was off stage, I was just counting down the seconds till I was back on.
Really?
Yeah, because I just love being. I love performing. I love being in front of people, and you know, I'm a bit of a people pleaser, I guess.
Yeah.
And I like to know that what I'm putting out there, people are enjoying.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me because I also know a bit of the backstory. When did you first become a dad? Because that's when you, I guess, sort of had your first diagnosis, as it were, of mental health struggles or psychological distress. I know you had them before that, but at what point were you the dad in all of this? At what point had you?
So 11 years ago, that my eldest was born, and you know, everybody tells you that when you first hold your child, you get this huge rush of love that, you know, you can't imagine your life without them, all this stuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my children. I loved my children when they were born as well, but I didn't get that instant rush that everybody was talking about. And I kind of brushed it under the carpet for a little while until the midwife or the health visitor came to the house and was talking to my wife and was giving her the post-natal checkup and asking her all the questions about postnatal depression. And every time my wife was answering no to one of the questions that the health visitor was asking, I was on the other side of the room answering yes.
In your head,
Internally,
obviously.
and internally, and it made me think that okay, maybe something's not right here.
Yeah. And had that happened during the pregnancy, before the pregnancy, after the pregnancy, or after the birth, as it were?
Yeah, it was after she was born that all happened. Here's where it gets a bit unbelievable, I guess, is that everything kind of happened really, really quickly. So my wife was 7 months pregnant, and I'd said, do you know what? It'd be nice if we all had the same. So we've been together for years, and we were going to get married. And I said it'd be nice if we all had, you know, the same surname. When the baby's born, and that was my subtle way of proposing. And
sort of,
I had
to get married, or do you want the same surname as me? Very sort of down to our Scottish way of doing it.
In fairness,
for our tax returns if we get married.
Well, in fairness, I had proposed before, and I had did the big proposal before, but this was just kind of pushing it along a wee bit. So we'd agreed to get married a month later, and it was just a really small ceremony. It was in the registry office. There was about 14 people there. It was a beautiful day, and that night, my wife went into labour.
Really?
On my wedding night.
Not to the wedding. So this is my honeymoon in the delivery suite.
Yeah. So I went from technically I went from being a single man with no kids to being married with a child in the space of 24 hours. and I think a lot of that ended up being a lot of pressure coming on as well.
Of course.
And growing up, my dad was always, and I'm sure you know this, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times before, you know, being the dad of the family, you have to be the provider, you have to be the man, you have to be strong, you know, all this stuff. At that point, I was working in a sales role in an electrical shop, not doing very well. I was very overweight. I wasn't the strong, manly man that you were supposed to be. My dad was the opposite of that. My dad, you know, was a provider. He was strong. He was and is, you know, one of the best dads that you could have. And I put that pressure on myself that I wasn't the provider that I thought I should have been. And I believe, and I obviously talking to my doctor and everything after that, that was one of the main catalysts behind the diagnosis of postnatal depression.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting because I think there's we're going to come on to male sort of images. I mean, I really identify with a lot of what you're saying about the anxiety of suddenly. There's a really odd thing that happens, I think. Well, it's certainly for me when my boy came into my life, and it was almost like overnight I went into a state of high anxiety, having expectations of myself that I'd never had before. And I'd known my boy for some time. I'm not his birth father, so he came into my life, and then I took responsibility. I remember when I felt like I'd taken responsibility and how extremely anxious I got about, I suppose, the narratives in my head about being the provider and taking responsibility, what that meant, because I'm old enough to be of the generation of guys that had that programmed into them. And I definitely didn't feel up to it, even though I was objectively, without a doubt, but I didn't feel up to it at all. And I found it, it was really tough. And I remember a friend of mine once said to me, "Noel, you know why you're anxious, don't you?" I was like, "No, I'm just really, well, you've just taken responsibility for a whole family overnight. Are you surprised that you're freaking out?" So,
yeah, all of a sudden you're responsible for keeping this human alive.
Yeah.
It's mad, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember on my daughter's first birthday at midnight. Yeah. Obviously, it was our wedding anniversary as well, obviously. And at midnight, my wife and I high-fived, and we were like, "Excellent, we've kept her alive for a year. Brilliant. Let's see if we can do another one." Yeah.
A reasonable response. It's interesting, though. The other thing that's interesting is that people just don't think that guys get postnatal depression, because the marketing around postnatal depression is literally, it's postnatal. It's, you have to give birth to have this thing. And I guess that was inside you as well at the time. That must be quite surprising, listening to these questions and thinking, yes, but I'm not the mum, so it couldn't be right.
Yeah, and that kind of takes me back to the stigma, I suppose, surrounding being a dad, because you're not supposed to feel like that.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be this strong provider. But what I find, and it's really interesting that you use the word marketing behind postnatal depression, because you are absolutely right. It is not, it's not deemed, I can't even think of the right word here, but I'm going to say trendy, or whatever, for men to be suffering this. It is the marketing that's doing that. But I mean,
literally all it means is depression that might come as a result of a birth. Doesn't necessarily, it actually has never really technically, from a mental health perspective, been linked to the act of giving birth.
Yeah.
It's only depression that is noticed after a birth.
Yeah. No, and I understand that, but
when you, I'm interested, because I know you got a very positive response from your GP, didn't you? When you went to your GP and said, how long did it take you from this sort of I guess you didn't say anything to the health visitor or your wife in that room at the time?
No, I kept that to myself, and it did cause. I think I was scared.
Yeah,
I was scared to admit that, and again, it's taking me back to this provider thing. I was scared to admit that I was, in my own eyes, I guess, failing as a dad. And it took me a long time to kind of to get myself around that. And when I get depressed, or when I have issues like that and I bottle them up, they do manifest themselves in different ways.
Right.
When I was 16, for example, and my gran passed away quite suddenly.
Yeah.
And that's the first death I ever experienced. And I didn't really grieve it properly, but I ended up self-harming.
Okay.
So that was that way of letting it out.
If you don't mind saying, just for people who may not, and I know what you mean by self-harm, deal with it all the time. What you mean is cutting yourself.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. I was actually talking about this today, actually. And, a lot of people who self-harm would cut their arms or somewhere hidden. I did it in my forehead.
Right.
I have no idea why. I wanted people to see that I was suffering. I don't know.
There's typically, there are hidden places, and then there are places that can be seen. That generally is how deliberate self-harm manifests. Yeah. And for those that choose places where it can't be seen, there are strong components of shame. And for those that don't choose, that show visible places, there's strong components of I need some help.
Yeah.
So that's required.
As I got older, I outgrew that, and so it would manifest itself in different ways. Whether it be,
I'm talking about how it functioned for you, because again, I don't think people. I know people don't understand deliberate self-harm and how it functions. I do, because I've worked with it a lot. Do you mind saying sort of what it did for you, what it gave to you? Because there are specific things that it helps people with, and it does for people.
Yeah, and I do think it's a dangerous word to use to use the word help, because I don't think it is a help. But at the time and when you're doing it,
technically, I would call it a maladaptive coping strategy.
Yeah. So when I did it, and I don't know how much detail I should go into here, but when I
let's be aware of triggers for people who are listening. So trigger warning: if you are deliberately self-harming these days, you may not want to listen. You may want to listen; it's okay. But if you do feel triggered, do talk to somebody about it, and we'll put up links towards helpful organisations at the end of the show. So that's the trigger warning. You don't need to go into massive amounts of detail. It's more about how did it function emotionally for you? Why were you doing it?
It was a release,
right?
And that, I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. Is it was building up. It was building up inside me, and it had to come out somehow. So when I did, cut my forehead and the blood, and it was bleeding, that blood to me was the release. That was those emotions coming out. And this is the mid-90s we're talking about. It was a time when men or boys weren't encouraged to talk about our feelings.
I mean, I get that, but I would also say there's still a lot of deliberate self-harm that happens for young people, and any of them that are listening to this should understand that it's something that we do understand very well. And for people who might be listening who, have a young person in their life or a partner in their life who is engaged in deliberate self-harm, it can appear very, very frightening to the witness. And indeed, it is a very frightening thing, but it has a function in people's life which makes sense. And your description is a very common description that I come across of people, that there seems to be two main functions for it. One is the release valve, that sense of release, and the blood seems to be implicated in that. The other one, which I don't think you used it for, was when people are so overwhelmed they're numbed out, and the physical pain of the harm brings them into their body and traumatic experiencing again, because that sense of extremely numbed out can also be very frightening and overwhelming in and of itself.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. But as the postnatal depression went on, obviously I was an adult, and I wasn't. I chose not to self-harm, but it did manifest itself in a different way, where I was spending money that we didn't have. I wanted all the latest things. I wanted the big TV. I wanted the latest. I like the latest tablets. I wanted all this sort of stuff.
Right.
I couldn't afford to pay for it, but I still wanted it, and I still got it. And that almost cost me my marriage.
Right.
It was.
Because I guess you weren't talking to your wife about what was going on.
No, not at that time.
Right.
Not at that time.
So the first time she understood there's a problem is when you're almost bankrupt, as it were.
Yeah. So I'll give you a specific story on that. There was one specific day where I'd gotten one of the latest tablets and I hadn't paid for it. I had made my payments. So somebody had come to the door, basically looking for the money. I wasn't in. And the person had confronted my wife. My wife had obviously gotten upset and embarrassed. And what my wife did, like, my wife didn't speak to her family about it. She went and spoke to my family about it, because my mum was going to give her an honest answer regardless. And my mum said to her, leave him. He doesn't deserve you. Just go, leave him. And it was later that day that I was having a conversation with my dad, and this kind of takes me back to, because I always look up to my dad, and he said to me, he said, if I lose those girls because of you, I'll never forgive you. And that one sentence was the wake-up call. Because because I've always looked up to my dad. My dad never ever spoke about his emotions. So when he said something like that, like, I will never forgive you, that was huge coming from him.
And how long did that, as it were, downfall take? How long did it take to get to that point?
I think we were about 4 years in by that point, because my second child was here by then. And yeah, so it was about 4 years, and that's 4 years of keeping that.
And that's without treatment or help for the reason why you were acting out in this way.
Yeah.
So, that's quite sort of serious. Obviously the consequences are quite serious in terms of, and again, for people that don't understand, just check, that might be, for people that don't understand, this sort of self-medication through purchasing is a well-known thing. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be online shopping, as it was in your case. Indeed, it could also be people becoming hypersexual and acting out with prostitutes, etc. But again, it's a very common story for me. And it's a very common sort of thing for guys to do who are not getting the help, and they don't realise that what this is an expression of psychological distress. And because I guess you got some sense when you purchased something of relief, didn't you? You got some sense of a buzz or happiness for a short period of time.
Because I felt that having, the big TV or the latest stuff, because I had that stuff in my house.
It's a demonstration of providing, being successful, and I get it. I understand that totally. So you've reached this point where there are consequences piling up. You may be going to lose your relationship, access to your children, a rupture in your relationship with your father, which I understand that would be profoundly frightening to you.
Yeah.
All of those consequences. What was your next step after that then? What did you do?
As far as I remember, and we're also talking a good few years ago now, but I believe that when things got really bad between my wife and I, would always have this I would always call it a come to Jesus talk, where we would sit and we would talk about everything. We'd be really, really open about things, and it was during that conversation where I agreed that I would go and speak to my GP.
Right.
And
sorry, I'm smiling because it's like such a classic bloke thing to do. You almost have to destroy your life before you go to your doctor and say, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
It's like, seriously, guys, please don't do this. So I'm sorry. In retrospect, it's amusing. It must have been pretty horrifying at the time, I think.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Men, men as a species are just sometimes.
I don't know what's wrong with us.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with us.
Well, how many holes do you need to dig before you realise you're in a hole, and how deep you have to be? So the ultimatum is, so that the worst thing that could possibly happen is you have to go and get help. That's your punishment, right?
Yeah.
Sort of
and so I went to speak to, it was Dr. McGregor. I don't mind naming her. You know, she's in my book. I talk about her like with a lot of respect. She, when I explained to her what I was going through, she knew right away, and she wasn't afraid to diagnose it.
Yeah.
Either, which I believe is a kind of a big deal as well, because having to diagnose a postnatal depression in a man is must be quite big. And it's funny because then knowing what it was, it helped me start to overcome what I was going through. Obviously, I'd end up being on medication, which is, you know, fine. I've got no shame on that. I've got no shame about being on medication. That
you got some SSRIs, I presume, citalopram or something like that.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And I've got no shame in admitting I'll probably be on that for the rest of my life. It's fine. I don't care. It's helped me become, you know, who I am. And yeah, things just started to change when that came.
During that time, what were you doing for a living? What was your career at that point?
So at that point, I was still working in sales. I was working as a salesperson in a major electrical store.
Not the one you were getting all these goodies from, I hope.
No, not at all. No. So yeah, and the thing is, my manager at that place didn't understand or didn't accept depression as a reason to be off. You know, all this. So it wasn't long before I left that job. More for my own well-being than anything else. And
you get the diagnosis from your doctor, you get the medication. You then go back to the job and say, look, I've got this depression thing, and then you get a knock back from this guy who he's just like depressed himself.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. That's basically what he says. I'm not buying it. That's not what, you know. And he was angry every time I handed in my 2-week sick line, you know, to say that, and I didn't need that kind of negativity in my life. So when I ended up leaving that job, and again, I was unemployed for a good while after that, but it was okay because we were looking after ourselves for a change.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when I started to pursue the radio dream. And because I figured, okay, I'm not working now. What can I do with myself? Where can I earn a wee bit extra money? And I got myself into some community radio, and volunteered there. And this is where things started to turn, because I started to realize that I can make things happen for me. You know, I can do things and I can make things happen. To give you a prime example, when I worked in this radio station, volunteered at this radio station, I asked for a slot where I could talk about professional wrestling, because I'm a big wrestling fan. I'll never deny that. And
are we talking American WWF, or are we talking Saturday morning, what I grew up on Saturday morning, Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy?
I do love the history of the Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy stuff. I love kind of looking back at that, but it is essentially the American stuff, the Undertakers, the Hulk Hogans, all those sort of people. So I interviewed this one guy his name was Eric Bischoff, and the interview went really, really well. And he tweeted out, you know, after the interview, and he said, "I've never had such a professional interview. It was great. It was great chatting to you." And I thought to myself, I could do something with this. And I knew that Eric was close friends with Hulk Hogan. So I opened up my email and I says, okay, so you've had a good time here. You've had a great chat with me. Do you think Hulk Hogan would be interested in chatting to me? And he said, leave it with me. And that's the last I thought about it. 2 days later, I got an email from him and he says, yeah, Terry's interested. Here's his number.
Wow.
And I got Hulk, and I've still got it. I've still got it to this day in my phone. I've got Hulk Hogan's phone number.
Absolutely amazing. And for people that don't know, I mean, I know who Hulk Hogan is. He was absolutely. I mean, if people think about the Dwayne Johnson, The Rock now, Hulk Hogan was at that level.
Yeah,
I mean, it really was. We're there today during his time, and then Dwayne The Rock took that mantle on. But really extraordinary performer as well. I mean,
yeah, one of the best. Well, I'd say best, not best, but one of the biggest wrestling names.
Yeah.
That there ever was. So we had that interview, and it was great. And then I'm starting to realize that, hold on a minute, I can make good things happen if I really try. And that's when I started really pushing for the radio career. When with Wave 102, I literally phoned them every single day for a year before I even got through the door for an interview.
It's that Chris bloke again. Oh, Jesus Christ, who's going to talk to him today?
It's him with that voice, that stupid DJ voice. But eventually they got me up and we had a wee chat, and I got to cover for somebody who went away on holiday for 2 weeks. Had a great time. Got paid to be on the radio, which is, it was huge for me.
Yeah.
And eventually got offered the drive time slot in that place, and it was all up from there. It was brilliant.
Well, it already was up, wasn't it? I mean, it's an extraordinary story because there's such a clear demarcation between when you were in the vicious circle of inappropriate coping strategies, maladaptive coping strategies that were making the situation worse, which is what maladaptive coping strategies do eventually, to having the diagnosis, getting the help, and then moving into what we call a virtuous circle. Things start to improve, and they start to improve exponentially. And then over a period of time, you begin to realize your own internal resources, and that gets reinforced with success in the chosen field. You become more authentic. You start pursuing your dreams. You start having dreams again, and you start putting them into action. And then you get positive reinforcement from that. So, I mean, it's a classic story, and one that needs to be heard and needs to be rammed down blokes' throats as much as possible, because these are the transformations that happen. Yeah.
The one message that I always try and tell people, and is the fact that because I sent you a copy of my book, but that wasn't the original title. Big Boys Do Cry. That wasn't the original title. The original title was Me Versus Me: How to Win the Fight Against Your Own Worst Enemy.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. I was the only person standing in my way of the relative success that I ended up having.
Yeah.
It was me that was stopping me. There's nobody else. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. There was another book you wrote as well, wasn't there? Or is this the one?
Yeah, no, the main one that kind of sparked everything after that. So to kind of take you on the journey a wee bit, I had 3 years at the radio station. Great time. Unfortunately, the radio station was sold, and the presenters didn't come with the station. So for me, at that point, the dream was over, you know. And I'm sure you get this, and I'm sure plenty of other people get this, where you get this imposter syndrome when you're doing really well, and you think, I don't really deserve to. Somebody's going to find me out. Somebody's going to find me out, and I'm it's going to be over. That's
I'm convinced that's going to happen about me, you know.
Yeah. So the day that I lost the job, I was like, well, that's it. It's over. I've been found out. I need to go and do,
go back to sales with that horrible man.
Yeah. And so what I ended up doing, because I did work in catering for a long time as well, I went back to my catering roots, and ended up working as a food and beverage supervisor for one of the local, I don't know what you would call it, resorts up here. And it was at that point.
Not one in McDonald, I hope.
No. I've been specifically told I'm not allowed to say anything about that. So you just don't put words in my mouth.
We're allowed. He's no longer in power, and he's never going to get back in power, I hope.
So so I did that job for a while, and it was in that job that I wrote Lucy's Blue Day.
Yes, that's the book I was thinking.
Which is a children's book. So, and that came about through me recognizing some really familiar traits in my daughter. So she was 8 years old, and I was sitting at the bottom of her bed, helping her get to sleep, and we were just having a wee chat. And she says to me, "Daddy, do you ever not like being you?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, yeah." And I remember feeling like that at 8 years old. I remember those feelings, and for me, obviously, because I didn't address those feelings and I didn't speak about them, that caused me a lot of problems later on in my life, and I didn't want my children to have these issues.
Yeah.
So that night, I got my phone out and I opened up the notes app, and I started writing this poem about the little girl whose hair changes color when she feels different emotions.
Great.
And
that's fantastic.
And I sat on it. I sat on it for about 6 months. I didn't do anything with it. And eventually I let my wife read it. And she says, "Chris, this is great. You should turn this into a book."
Yeah.
And, do something with it.
Turn it into an app so we can see our kids' moods with it. Like that would be a superb filter on Instagram.
That's a great idea, actually.
We should do that.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down.
And then we can sort of change our moods and our colours.
Yeah.
I love it.
So my wife suggested that we get it illustrated and turn it into a book. And I should say as well that this book, I didn't intend on it going public. I genuinely wrote it for one set of eyes, and that was it.
Yeah.
But when we did find the illustrator, yes, of course, professional illustrator, going to cost a lot of money, money that I didn't have. So that's when we went public and we started to crowdfund for it.
Yeah.
And we realised that there was a lot of interest there. And I'd raised about £1,500 to pay the illustrator. I was about £500 short. And again, this is where the story takes a strange, unbelievable turn, because I got a text message from a friend of mine. Her name's Leslie. She doesn't mind being named. And she says, "Chris, I've seen what you're doing with your book. I really love what you're doing. I would like to help." Now, that might, to the average person, that might seem, well, that's a really nice thing for somebody to do. Maybe give a couple of £100, things like that. But what we didn't realize was about a month prior, Leslie had won the lottery.
No, clever.
And I'm not even just, and I'm not saying win the lottery and she got 5 numbers and won a couple of $100,000. No, this lady, Leslie, she got 6 numbers on the Euro Millions and won £58 million.
Great.
A month prior to sending me this message.
Brilliant.
So she ended up becoming the prime investor in the thing, and she ended up paying in maybe about 15 to 20 grand, getting the first run of books done and dolls, and really, really helped us out at the beginning.
Yeah.
And once it started to get out there in the public domain, the demand for it was unbelievable. Before COVID, I was up and down the country, from as high up as Aberdeen to as low down as Somerset to across in Belfast, visiting 3 schools a day, 5 days a week, giving these mental health talks to children. And when you think to where I was just a few years before that,
exactly.
It was crazy.
Yeah, but it's also one thing that really strikes me is this: the sort of that we often talk about, and I think we quite rightly, the benefits of mental health support for the people who have psychological distress, like yourself or like myself. But we don't often talk about what you did, which is the preventative work with your own child. Actually, another father who's not come to terms with his own distress may have brushed aside his little girl's question. May have said, "Oh, don't be silly. You're all fine. Don't worry, darling." Da, 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 da. But you didn't. You recognised it for what it was, and you weren't afraid of it. And you were able to say, "Yeah, I get it. I've been through that, and I understand it." And you were able to help her understand her feelings and role model her way as an adult dealing with these complicated issues, and then turning on its head creatively, which seems to be something that you do. There's something about you transform into sort of creativity. Can people still get hold of the book?
Yeah. All my books are on Amazon. They're just, you just need to stick on the search engine, Lucy's Blue Day.
James will do that, and James will post out a link. So say the title of it again.
Yeah, so Lucy's Blue Day, or Archie Unplugs the Internet, or Big Boys Do Cry. That's the 3 books that I've got out there. Okay,
so James will put out links to make it easy for people too. So you write this book, you get this angel investor, and again, there's these sort of virtuous circles of growth and development going on. What was the sort of next step for you, Chris?
So I had hoped that I was going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'd hoped that I would get to visit all these different schools and visit, like, maybe go worldwide with it, because it was growing, and it was growing at quite a dramatic pace at points. But then the pandemic hit and everything stopped. So to try and bring you to where I was thinking at that point is that, my wife and I, we struggled financially most of our lives. We were living paycheck to paycheck. It didn't help that I was buying stupid big TVs and things like that, or
big microphones. But let's not about
that. This was a number one bestseller purchase.
Yeah, all right. Oh, sorry, I pressed the button now. I apologize.
So we'd struggled, like we struggled a lot throughout our life, particularly financially. And then when the book started to do really, really well, we started to earn a bit more money, and we were comfortable. And it was like, yeah, this is it. This is our after, so to speak. This is the end of our story.
Yeah.
And then COVID came. Everything stopped. Book sales stopped. The school visits stopped, and frankly, the income stopped as well. And that's where I said at the beginning, I started to take it really personally. It's like, why has the universe done this to me? Yeah. Why is it giving me a taste of this success and then just taking it away? Yeah. And again, my wife, savior of everything that I've ever done, and I'm saying that because she's right in front of me just now, and I'm being a sook. But she suggested that I try therapy, because the obviously, you'll know yourself, therapist's job isn't to go, okay, I've got rid of COVID, you can go back and do your school visits now. No, that's not what their job. Their job is to help you come to terms with the situation that you are in now. And that's what my therapist ended up doing. She helped me get through this personal thing where I thought the world had a personal vendetta against me and my family, to eventually accept that, it's not just me that's going through this, the entire world is going through this. Everybody has had their own.
I'm laughing because I'm identifying. I mean, I also can make a pandemic personal. I have no doubt. I mean, it's possible. And I think probably 99% of the guys listening to this really get that. Yeah. A global event like a pandemic is literally that, but it can feel very personal, can't it?
Yeah, and it really did. And I would get, jealous almost of people who turned the pandemic into a bit of a success.
Yeah.
There's people there's even podcasters out there who
Well, I found them intensely irritating, I have to say.
Yeah, same. And I actually had to.
To be honest, I don't think I was on my own with.
Yeah.
It's like it wasn't. I mean, I'm one of those people. I've got like strong social anxiety problems. I'm sort of more introvert than most people realise. So the first stay-at-home order was like, I actually did thrive because not having any social contact and somebody telling me I'm not allowed to, was just fine. But as it dragged on, it wasn't fine. It was really, really tough.
Yeah,
sort of psychologically, it was very distressing, to be honest.
So my therapist helped me get through that and helped me accept the fact that, you know, I might not get to do it again, and I might not get to go into the schools, and I might not get to do all that stuff. So
that sounds like you were grieving.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's one of the theories of postpartum depression is that it is a form of grieving because you don't get the beautiful, wonderful sort of attachment that everybody promises you. Like, it just doesn't happen, and you then get these grim things. So there's quite a bit of loss to process as well. So it sounds a bit like both of those things.
Yeah, present. And that is exactly what it was. I remember telling my therapist that I pictured Lucy, the character in the book, as, you know, my fourth child.
Yeah.
That's the impact that she had on her life, that she was like the fourth child.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she was taken away from us. Yeah. And it was heartbreaking. But as I said, my therapist helped me through it and helped me realize that, you know, I might not get to do it again. I'll come to terms with that. You know, the book's always going to be there. It's always the book will be here long after I'm gone.
Yeah.
And it will still be helping people, and that's what's important to me. And yeah, now that we're kind of heading out the other side of the pandemic, hopefully, I've found a career path that I can really thrive in, which is charity. I work for a children's charity, here in Tayside.
Are you allowed to say which one?
Yeah, it's the Archie Foundation.
Okay.
We'll
look them up and put a link as well.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Archie Foundation and what they do.
Yeah, so the Archie Foundation, they help. The long and short is we help sick children, but it's more to do with because visiting hospital is not a pleasant experience for anybody. So our job is to try and lighten that experience a bit. So we take what the NHS have given and we make it better.
Okay.
You know, so we're just about to open up a brand new surgical ward at Nine Wells Hospital in Dundee, which we raised £2 million to make. And I was in the ward actually about last week, and you forget that you're in an NHS hospital because it's beautiful, this ward. But that's the sort of things that we do, and my job is to fundraise for them.
So you make those environments like child and family friendly, so that the kids coming in, the families coming in, it's not a cold clinical experience. It's welcoming and family and child oriented, which is much needed because that reduces the trauma and the impact. And so what's your role within the organisation, and what is it that you do, Chris?
So I am I fundraise for them. My job is to fundraise and to bring in the income to help pay for the services that we provide, which could be anything. I can encourage people to fundraise for us. I've got people, like for example, I've got people going up all the art with the Archies. I don't know. I didn't know this, right? But a mountain over 1,000 meters or 1,000 kilometers, I can't remember, is called an Archie. So we've got 140 different people.
Meters, not kilometers, I promise you.
Yeah.
I'm a mountaineer. 1,000 kilometers is like you're heading towards the moon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it shows you what I know.
Yeah.
So we've got like 140 different people climbing all the Archies in Scotland in one day.
Great.
we'll get things like that. I've got a win your wedding competition going out where people can fundraise. So it's great fun. I get to fundraise and I get to help children, which is what I seem to have found my niche, basically.
So it strikes me, Dad, who isn't a very good provider for his own children in his own head way back then, that here you are, having dealt with, come to terms with your mental health issues and live with them, because they don't ever go away. They're still part of us. Mm-hmm. You're now a fantastic provider for many of other people's children as well. That's quite an extraordinary transformation. Are you aware of that, Chris?
Until you just said it, I wasn't, and it's almost poetic the way you put it as well.
It's extraordinary. It's sort of like you've gone from this guy who sees himself as so much of a failure, not even so much of a failure that he can't even talk about it. I can't provide for my own family, to fundraising and providing for other people's families that are struggling and putting back into society. I mean, that's a wonderful fathering that you're doing, and provision of resources, and it's an extraordinary journey that you are still on, actually. But that's, I mean, what's a beautiful story.
Oh, you don't do this. You're going to get me all going. Don't.
I'm allowed to get you going. I remember I lived in Scotland. I know what
that's true.
So, I mean, but it is extra. Has that really never occurred to you before?
It genuinely hasn't. Honestly, genuinely hasn't until you just said it there. And it's your
dad must be so proud of you these days. He must be looking at his son. He probably doesn't tell it to you, because Scottish dads don't, except for your generation. His generation definitely won't. But he must be blown away by what you're achieving.
Yeah, I would like to think so. I would really, really like to think so. And since he became a granddad, he has been a lot more open about his feelings, and
good.
Because people always say apparently being a grandfather is like the second chance of being a dad again. But more fun.
A lot of parents or children of the grandparents, or like you, the son, there can be some resentment about it, but it's always the case that the grandparents do a better job with the grandchildren than they do for their own children.
Yeah,
that's the way it is. It's sort of like a law of growing up.
So he is a lot more open about his feelings and stuff now, and he has. And not so many words has expressed, his pride, or how.
I would hope so. I mean, you are a remarkable person, Chris. I mean, a really, truly extraordinary story that you've got.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's yes, I didn't expect it to turn like this, but thank you. I'd really appreciate.
You go from somebody digging a hole, sort of toxic consumerism, to outfitting surgical wards. I mean, that's quite a turnaround, mate. You've got to admit that's quite a turnaround. It's sort of
okay. I'll give you.
It's sort of the interesting thing is it's using exactly the same skills, which is getting a load of dosh and spending it on stuff. So well done.
I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, it's the same skill set, but just used in a much more positive way. I mean, it's remarkable, and I think this is the story here, is that for most people who come to terms with their psychological distress, they become assets rather than drains to the community. And that's why we need to be helping people. Yeah. We become an asset. And because we come to terms with it, we become a useful member of society again when we support people. And in your case, it was just a prescription for citalopram. Poor old little citalopram gets a little stick, but it's a bloody helpful drug at times, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And it helped me, and it's still helping me, today.
So James will have put the link out. As you can see, I'm winding us up because we are sort of at the end of the show. I told you, everybody says to me when we have the pre-show chat, an hour, I haven't got a lot to say for an hour. But we always run out of time like this, and you're surprised that we're at the end of the show, right?
Yes,
everybody is. Chris, I mean, I haven't heard such a remarkable story of transformation in a long time, actually. I mean, yours is a genuinely remarkable story of transformation, and you've shared it in a very humble and straightforward way. I would say in a very Scottish way. I mean, I'm used to Scottish people underplaying their heroism. Sort of, it's pretty much genetically programmed into Scots not to blow their own trumpet, but I'm going to blow it for you. It is a remarkable story, Chris, and it's a remarkable transformation from where you were to where you are now. It's a fantastic story, and I'm so glad to have heard it. Really.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying so, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I love it.
It's a great. I'm going away for a couple of weeks on holiday. I'm off to this place. Hence,
I see it.
So I'm off to Rio to see my boy on Monday. So I won't be here for the next couple of weeks, folks. You'll have James will put up some repeats. But this is what a gift. Your story feels like a real gift to me, Chris, to take with me on my holiday for the next couple of weeks. So stay there. I'm going to wrap the show up, but I want you to stay there as I say goodbye to people. So, folks, I'll see you in live 3 weeks' time. I hope you all have a wonderful time in the meantime. And I'll come back looking horribly tanned, and you can all be desperately sort of jealous and envious of me and say all sorts of horrible things too. I won't care because I'll have been on a beach for 2 weeks. So there you go. You can feel whatever you like. I'll be happy. Or I'll be miserable, actually, because I'll be back in London. So there you go. But it's been a wonderful evening. I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you all live in 3 weeks' time. So goodbye for now.